Hi there, folks. Brian Benz here, Cloud Advocate at Microsoft, introducing another JDConf 2024 on-demand session. It's my honor to introduce Martin Lippert, Spring Tools lead. He's going to be talking about the latest goodness that's coming out of Spring Tools. All the things he describes, works on Eclipse, IntelliJ, Thea, and of course Visual Studio Code and Codespaces. I'll let Martin fill you in on the details.
Hey, welcome to my little session about Spring Tools Live to show you all the great new things in the Spring Tools for VS Code this time. And my name is Martin. I work for the Spring engineering team, so the team that does the Spring Boot stuff and Spring Framework. And my work focuses on the Spring Tools, so all the IDE extensions that try to make your life easier when you hack inside your IDE and when you try to write Spring Boot applications, in this case, using Visual Studio Code. So the stuff that I'm going to talk about, I will show you, I mentioned that is around Visual Studio Code. We do the same kind of open source tooling also for Eclipse, for example, or for Thea, or for Codespaces and those environments. If you are a user of IntelliJ, you can, of course, use something like IntelliJ Ultimate Edition from JetBrains that also has great Spring tooling. We don't do special Spring tooling for IntelliJ because it's already there. So you should use that version instead. But this time we focus on VS Code. And with that, I really don't like to talk a lot about slides, about tools. I really like to show tools in action. So that's why I would like to dive in and show you some cool new stuff that is part of the new Spring Tools releases. So let me jump over to my VS Code installation. And I installed, of course, a lot of nice extensions, especially the Java language support, of course, and the Spring Boot extension pack, Spring Tools. And I have a little pet clinic example here, of course, pet clinic example. What else? And I would like to talk about basically three different things that I would like to show you. One thing is kind of writing code. So what do you do if you write code, and what kind of improvements happen to the Spring Tools to make it easier to write code and work with existing Spring code? The second part will look into live data, so live information from running Spring applications. You might know these kind of green hovers that show up when you run your Spring apps in case you use Spring Boot actuators in VS Code. They give you information. I will show you some nice, cool new things that we did in this space. And the third part will focus on the upgrade experience. So little things that we did to make it easier for you to discover new Spring Boot versions and things like that. So the first part, the coding thing. One thing that we did is, for example, if you are working on web controllers, there's a nice kind of code assist that pops up, code completion right away. For example, if you type add, you immediately get content assist for let's implement a get mapping, and you can easily implement a get mapping over here, doing things like that. Super convenient code assist. So of course, if you do something like add get, or you can do post, get the same for post, the usual things, right? Nice little things to make it super easy and super convenient to add those things to your existing controllers. Or if you create a new controller, you can also start that way. It makes it super easy and super fast to write those things. Another thing that we did, for example, is to kind of validate your source code and inspect it for certain kind of springy elements and Spring annotations and Spring things that you do, and try to help you with that to modernize your code, to make you aware of things that should be done differently. And one of those examples is if you have, for example, an auto-wired field. So let me put something in here saying, let's say you have my bean over here. So what you will see is it's being highlighted automatically, because having auto-wired fields, it's not really, it's possible, it still works, but it's not really the preferred way. The preferred suggested way is to use a constructor instead, constructor injection. So you can do that. You can just invoke quick fix and convert this into an auto-wired constructor that is automatically auto-wired for you, converting this into a private field, private final field actually, and adding the constructor. If there is already a constructor in the source code, it will of course be added to this existing constructor right away. So it will really produce the code that you would expect. Another example for this is if you have a constructor injection thing and you have auto-wired on the constructor, that's also still possible. And some people like this for kind of readability but it's not really necessary. So it gives you a little hint saying you can remove the unnecessary auto-wired thing. So let me also do this, invoke the quick fix, remove this, and this way you will see that you get really, really, really nice content assist that is Spring specific to help you quickly doing stuff. If you don't like those warnings, if they maybe show up in the wrong place because there's a bug, if you, for example, like to have auto-wired annotations on constructors and you don't want this warning to show up, you can of course customize everything in the settings. So you can go to the preferences, you can go down to the extensions, you can go down to Spring Boot tools, and here you will see all the best practices and optimizations, all the validations basically that will happen. For example, the Java auto-wired constructor, unnecessary auto-wired, and you can just change it and say, please ignore this, don't show me this. I think this is very important because some of those best practices, we think those are the best practices, but maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you would like to kind of choose a slightly different style. So you can customize the tooling to that, which is, I think, just super important to be able to do that. So you can do all that, right? No annoying warnings showing up if you don't want them. That was kind of the first part about making coding stuff easier, and a few things that we added recently to the tooling to make it easier. We will continue to work on that, right? We will really, really continue. And the other part that we worked on for this coding experience is the speed, the performance under the hood. So all these validations and all those kind of warnings that show up, you've already seen them. They show up really immediately if you work on source code. And if you load up your project, if you open your workspace, they also really show up immediately. So we invested a lot of time into optimizing this and actually exchanging an old implementation that we had a few releases back with a completely new implementation of this validation work. And now it's really, really super fast. Another place where we improved the performance is when you added application.property files. You get content assist, you get validations, but those things are really, really super fast and show up immediately, as you can see, right? There's no delay. If you open a properties file for the first time and you start type, it's really just super fast content assist and tells you basically everything. The same, of course, happens for the validations. They just show up there, right? So it's really, really fast. So good progress makes it super easy to use and super fast to use, which I think is super important, right? The second part that we looked into is something that I personally very, very much like, the ability to use information from a running Spring Boot application and show this information inside of your source code. So let me do that by going to the Spring Boot dashboard. And you can see some beans and request mapping stuff from your source code, but you can also see all the apps that you have in your workspace, and you can just start them. So let me start my pet clinic example right here. And you can see already some live information coming up here. For example, you see all the beans that are live from my project, from my source code in the running application. You can, of course, also switch this to show all the beans, so not only the ones from my source code, but from the libraries as well. You can see all the request mappings that are active. You can basically also kind of jump to them right away. Makes it super easy to test basically request mappings out using a simple browser. Inside of VS Code here, you can see the properties, so all the stuff, how is my application being configured? And you can also see kind of the memory consumption down here. So you see a little view, just gives you a brief overview about how is memory doing. Is it increasing all the time? Is it changing? So if you hover over, you see the memory consumption across different regions and the Java heap. If you want to see something else, you can also switch over to non-heap memory, and you can even look at kind of garbage collection times out here. Just give you a quick insight into the running app. It does not really replace a profiling tool or whatever. It's not aimed at replacing that. You should still use your profiling tool to do all that, but it gives you just a quick idea about what's going on here. And the next really, I think, important step here showing this live information is that we try to bridge the gap between what happens at runtime and what happens in your source code. What did you write in your source code, and how does it transfer into stuff that happens at runtime? So we get this runtime information as soon as you use Spring Boot actuators on your project, and we make this mapping for you. So we put this information back into the source code with these green hovers. So for example, here, add controller, you get a little pop-up saying, this welcome controller is active as a bean in this process, so that it's really around, right? You see this get mapping is really active, and you can even kind of see the URL for this mapping. Let me maybe switch to something that is a little bit more comprehensive. So here you can, for example, see the owner controller. So you can even see that the owner controller is getting an owner repository injected. And where's the owner repository actually coming from? So the bean that actually gets injected at runtime comes from this source code over here. Helps you to find out the difference between what happens at runtime, what is Spring Boot doing, and how is Spring Boot wiring all those beans, compared to what did you write in your source code. So we basically put everything together in one place to give you this information right away, where we think where you need this basically in your source code, right? Which is, I think, super interesting. For example, in this case, I have a conditional bean that I only want to show up and be present in the runtime when a certain property is around. So in this case, you see that the add component thing is not highlighted. So this bean is not active. But you get an additional information on the add conditional thing over here saying conditional on property did not find the property pet clinic as one message. So you get additional information about why is this conditional annotation, why did that not match, basically. So you get an idea about why is this bean not, you don't not only see this bean is not active, you also get an idea about why is it not active at runtime. Could help with debugging quite a bit. The new thing that we did in addition to all those things is basically, for example, if I go back to my simple browser and hit that kind of a few times, you see that the logging of my system is set to probably the info level, and that's fine. So I could go back to the application.properties file and change this and restart it and then get new additional logging information. But we have kind of a new command saying set the log levels of a running Spring Boot application from the outside using Spring Boot actuators. So you can select the process, basically, in this case, Pet Clinic, and say, oh, let me kind of switch the log level on this kind of very kind of generic package here, Org Spring Framework, and let me set it to trace, actually. So see, oh, the log level has been updated. So if I execute stuff, you see, oh, there's a lot more log output being generated from the app in trace or debug mode or whatever. And if I think, this is too annoying, let's go back, set the log levels again, and let me switch it back to what it was before. I think it was info. So now it's back to info. So really, really nice support to basically deal with kind of different log outputs. You don't need to restart your app, right? Of course, those settings would be gone if you stop the app and restart it, right? Because it only affects the settings in the live running application. So for this case, you still would have to kind of change the application properties file or the configuration if you want to have this change persistent. But just for kind of making this change quickly to take a look at the running things. Right? Okay, cool. So let me quickly stop my running application and switch back to the third topic about new Spring Boot versions coming out. And I would like to talk about that a little bit, because what we see is that there are new Spring Boot versions coming out basically all the time, right? New patch versions coming out, new minor releases coming out, even sometimes new major releases coming along. And you always face the challenge to stay up to date, right? Stay up to date with the latest patch release. That's kind of a no-brainer, right? Of course, you need to do that, but you also want to stay on top of the latest minor versions. And sometimes you also want to kind of quickly, more aggressively update to the next major version, maybe also because of kind of open source support is running out of the support range or other things, right? So you want to adopt new features. So usually what you do is you go to the migration guide, go to the release notes, you take a look at what are all the changes that are necessary for my project, and then you walk through all this stuff, right? So you basically take a look at every entry, at the guide, and you're trying to upgrade your project step by step. So the idea from the tooling side is, let's do something about this, right? Let's help you along this process. Let's make it easier for you to upgrade to new Spring Boot versions and to actually know about new Spring Boot versions in the first place. So what do? We do first automatically check the version of the project that you have in your workspace. And we compare that to the latest versions that are around and give you this information right away in the tooling, right? So whenever you work on your Spring project inside of the workspace, you will see your version and what is the latest versions. And is this still supported? What's the latest version? How can I move to that? And the next step is to also help you with jumping over to this new version, whatever that exactly means, right? Maybe just a simple POM file update because it's just a patch version that doesn't require any additional changes. Maybe it's more involving. We try to automate more of that as well, right? The idea is really to help you with it. It's not to kind of a silver bullet, we do everything automatically, right? We try to automate as much as possible. We try to automate the annoying parts, right, that take up a lot of time, but we cannot really do everything automatically for you. But let's dive in and see what this kind of early days support is and tell us, try it out, tell us what you think. So let's go back, right? I have my Spring Boot pet cleaning application. And if I take a look at the problems view here, I see a number of information markers coming up. And especially on the POM file, I see that there's a new patch version coming along. So there's a warning showing up. I can directly see, compared to the version that I use, there's a newer version along. So I use version 2.7.3. There is 2.7.18, it's the latest patch version for 2.17, right? That is publicly available. I also get the information that 2.7 is already out of open source support. So, hey, I'm using 2.7, but the open source support already ended in November last year. So I could get commercial support that kind of gives me support for a little longer. And I can see that there's a new minor or new major version, in this case, a new major version coming up. And we try to give you quick fixes for all of those things, right? Quick fix to upgrade to the latest patch version, quick fix to kind of give you the website to get commercial support, and of course, a quick fix to upgrade to new major versions. And I would like kind of to do that. I would like to tell the tooling, please try and execute a full migration script to get me onto Spring Boot 3.2 in this case. So what happens in the background? It uses OpenRewrite and tries to make all the necessary changes to my source code. And let me just kind of preview that. And in the preview view, I can see what would happen, right? So let me take a look, for example, at the POM file. So the POM file, it would make changes to, of course, the parent Spring Boot version, the Java version. It would update Jacoco version. It would add dependencies that are necessary. It would update the MySQL connector dependency because that changed. Things like that, right? Really, really great. Not only just upgrade the parent version, but also other things. It would update to the Jakarta packages, of course. It would apply additional changes that are interesting for me to use. And I can kind of scroll down and see, oh, the more of the Jakarta ones. Here you can see it is also kind of polishing my code a little bit. So it thinks that the parameter for the path variable annotation is not needed because it's kind of using the same name or something like that. So it removes that. In this case, it knows that the owner ID is not needed because it's over here, so it removes that. So it's not only transforming your project to the new Spring Boot version, it's also kind of trying to kind of polish things up. Let me just discard that. So you can apply basically all those changes across all those files, which gives you basically a version of your project that is migrated to Spring Boot and upgraded to Spring Boot 3.2 for most of the cases. Maybe there's some bits and pieces that are still missing that you need to do manually, but it does a lot of stuff for you automatically. And if you want to see what's going on behind the scenes, if you want to know and want to pick and select which changes the tooling should do and not, as possible with a command. So you can kind of do something like upgrade Spring Boot version, and there you can dive into what happens if I upgrade to a specific Spring Boot version, and you can dive into the details of the individual steps. But that's too much for today to really dive into the details. So let me get back to the slides. We talked about what's going on behind the scenes. It's called the kind of OpenRewrite, which we use to make these transformations. That's an open source project. It's mostly maintained by a company called Modern. But you can also kind of take a look at that and, for example, execute those upgrade recipes yourself outside of the IDE. We just did a little IDE integration on top of that, but you can also execute them outside of the IDE. And you can use it, for example, to kind of basically make changes to your project across all kinds of files, like whether it's Java source code, whether it's application property files, whatever, basically. There are the building blocks inside of OpenRewrite, and you can use them. For example, the Spring Boot 3.2 migration is built up from these small building blocks in OpenRewrite called the small recipes, and basically collected and combined them into all the bits and pieces that are necessary to jump from another version to Spring Boot 3.2. You could also use this for patching CVE things, making changes to your source code and things, or adapting to new APIs. Like there's a method being renamed, you want to rename your own code to this new method. You can basically write the recipes yourself if you want that, which is also quite powerful. How they write internally, we don't go into the details. It's basically parsing source code, transforming them into ASTs, and then you can write down your own logic to modify and massage those ASTs if you want. Or you can write YAML files to use existing building blocks to modify those ASTs. For example, predefined building block is rename a property in the property file, or rename a property key inside of a property file. Then you can just basically say, rename this property key into this property key, and this is what will happen. And then you aggregate them together, which makes all this great upgrade experience possible, I think, which is quite nice. If you try this out, let us know how things work. You will basically get the slides. There are a few references, also to OpenRewrite, if you want to dive into the details of that, which I think could be very interesting, especially if you want to adopt something like this for maybe your own in-house libraries that you want to upgrade as well. So that's not only something that is specifically for Spring versions, but also for other frameworks, or you write the stuff yourself, which I think is really cool. And the stuff that you've seen for kind of putting a validation onto the autowired and then kind of having a quick fix to, for example, remove this unnecessary autowired, or to convert an autowired field into a constructor, that is actually also using these little recipes from OpenRewrite under the hood to actually do the code change, which I think opens up the door for many of those quick fixes in the IDE, and describing them in a very easy way, which is, I think, very, very cool. So we really look forward to do more of this in the future. We already saw the demo from the quick fixes, and with that, I would like to point you at additional resources. So you can get the Spring tools as usual from the VS Code Marketplace if you want to grab it from there. If you prefer the Eclipse version, go to spring.io/tools to download the latest distribution. And if you have feedback for us, jump on Twitter or X now, or go to GitHub to the project repository for the Spring tools called STS4, and give us feedback, raise issues, talk to us, because that's what we're really looking forward to, is hearing from you how things work, what are you missing, how can we make your life even easier in the future while you hack Spring Boot applications. And with that, I would like to thank you for watching this little recording and this little session about the great new things in the Spring tools. And with that, thank you, and enjoy all the other sessions. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Check out this and more at jdconf.com.